Louisiana versus all y'all. Jarrett Roser here today with another local reporter, good friend for a shockingly long time at this point.
Yeah, how did we make it?
Digital content producer for WWL now, Amos Morale, dealing with. Our background has largely been in sports journalism, but Amos gets a chance to cover a lot of different aspects of food, music, and culture around New Orleans area now, and really kind of the broader area gets up here, still gets to cover some LSU and all those things, and really coming along quite nicely in your push to be able to be mistaken as Donald Glover's cousin. So Amos, man, we're definitely going to get into a lot of topics. Kind of the thing that sparked this was you texting me, asking me about my Louisiana rapper, Mount Rushmore. So the high school and college athletes will probably want to stick around and see where we've got NBA young boy. Uh, but how have things been going overall, man?
Things are growing fine. You mentioned food and culture, but over these last few months, due to the big events ban and the restaurants are just starting to get open back up. I've pretty much become like a news photographer. I feel like I'm going to the press conferences that the NOPD is having, that the mayor's having, with the governors in town. I've been covering that. So the roles have definitely shifted a lot during the quarantine, and understandable. Not a lot of sports going on, and the sports that are going on, the audience here just, UFC, it's popular, but here it's just not like a huge traffic driver. So everybody's having to adapt right now, and you're fortunate to still be employed, because I know there's unfortunately a lot of people in this industry that aren't right now, but you know pretty pleased with just being able to keep doing what I do.
With us not being able to hang out as much as we usually get to, I guess I have two questions following up on what you just said. One, would you say that you are closer friends at this point with me or with John Bell Edwards? And how much do you wish UFC was garnered more traffic here? Because obviously, as much as you say that doesn't have a huge following in New Orleans compared to maybe some other areas, that's definitely a passion for you.
Well, first off, it's still you. Uh, Unfortunately, I guess. I
Unfortunately
haven't
for which of us?
I haven't climbed the social circles enough to be doing Zoom chats with John Bell Edwards yet. But I'm working on it. Uh, but I don't know. At times, I kind of wish it was bigger, because it would give me more to do sports wise, that I could say, hey, this is sports work I'm doing. But at the same time, it's nice to just be able to sit back and watch some sports without having to take in the work factor. I'm sorry, NASCAR just doesn't do it for me. I don't know. Like I've tried to watch it, and I don't know, for whatever reason, NASCAR is just not it. So, but it's nice to be able to watch some sports and just sort of enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm with you on NASCAR. It's been interesting though to see the point in their history and overall landscape that they've been at, because that's been such a huge part of the otherwise relatively slow sports news cycle of late. For I think both of us, when we were in college, as much as we got into sports journalism, we tried to be open to kind of rounding out the skill set. And I think when we were in college, I think a lot of it was a sense of realizing it's tough to get jobs in this industry at points, and trying to make sure that you had skill sets that were going to keep you employed long term and be able to, have a place to live and potentially provide for a family and stuff like that. So I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
we kind of like dabbled in that a little bit early, but I know that's been such a weird transition for a lot of reporters with all of the news coverage aspects you mentioned. You've been out at protests, getting your outlets footage of the protests going on in New Orleans. What's kind of been your overall takeaway? Any challenges that you've faced in terms of kind of making that transition and dealing less and less with sports in recent months? And I guess for any youngsters thinking about getting into journalism, what's kind of your advice in terms of that, that aspect of this industry for them?
Well, that's a very multi-layered question right there. Well, for starters, one of the challenges I think of kind of shifting that mindset is that with news, you're still out to tell a story, or when I'm out at a protest, like if I'm getting video or footage or pictures or whatever, I'm trying to find things that are telling the story, but the stories are just different there. In sports, you have like lots of unique stories with each individual athlete, how they got there or how they're maintaining or how they're improving. With this, for instance, I went out to a protest, and you kind of feel somewhat of the pressure. You want to cover it accurately, but you're also why you're there. You're there because of the larger encompassing issues, but your readership, is looking at it from a different angle. So it's a little more challenging to, I guess, tell the story in a way that has complete context and doesn't leave anything up for interpretation. Because particularly in this current climate we are, with the way when some people are really against the various media outlets, and that's one thing I've really noticed from this quarantine is you don't really get that so much in sports. I mean, you get the angry fan, you get the the angry fan who doesn't like what you wrote about the Saints or doesn't like what you wrote about LSU because he can't turn off his fan vision to see that, well, the dude only had 20 yards and averaged 2 yards a carry. You know what I mean? He can't get past that. But here it's like, all right, literally you're watching the protest. You're hearing what the protesters are saying, what they're chanting, but if I don't give you the correct context, you're going to find some way to interpret it differently. So that's like, I think the unique challenge is being able to tell that story in a way that leaves nothing up to interpretation. Whereas with sports, I think it's much easier because, most of the time it's like the ball went in the hoop or the guy went in the end zone. There's no debating. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's interesting because even in sports, the bias against media pops up sometimes in a way where I've literally been having conversations with athletes and they start to say, man, like the media disrespecting us, like no the media doesn't love us, whatever. And I say, you realize we're media, like we are the media, right? We're here to cover your story, and we're like, I mean, like not you though, like you guys are great, but like the media is the, and there's this weird reflex to hate on the media as this blanket type to just distrust the media. And so when you see that in that regard at the sports level, and then you transition that from wins and losses to life and death and betterment of society and things like that, the amplification there is obviously infinitely larger.
Well, and that was one of the things that really, I think, kind of blew my mind. I'd tweet out a video from the protest, and somebody would retweet it and say, "Oh, the media won't show you this," and I'm like, I have a blue check, like because I'm the media, or like I think it was it LeBron who tweeted a video from the official newspaper in that town and said the media won't show you this, and you're like, you literally are retweeting the official newspaper's Twitter. But I think that just that's one of the things that a lot of people, and you kind of get this when you talk to fans and readers and viewers and listeners and people that consume the content you're putting out, that sometimes they just don't really have a great grasp of everything that's involved in this job and what goes into it. And that's part of any industry. I don't know everything that's involved in what a mechanical engineer does, or honestly don't know everything that's involved in what a doctor does, other than what happens to me. So it makes sense that, all right, they only see the finished product. They don't know that there was a lot of research and that I had to make this dude feel comfortable with telling me this story or whatever. Sometimes they'll see a headline and won't click on it, and they'll say like, oh, look at them bashing this guy, when the guy is the one who says, I need to get better at this. It's it's hard sometimes for them to turn the blinders off. But I do think that that's one thing that it's kind of really opened my eyes. Being in sports exclusively, you get the fans, but like it seems just so much. There's a whole lot of just not understanding of, all right, hey, I don't work for CNN. And honestly, the guy they have talking right now doesn't really work for CNN either. You know what I mean? Like it's everyone just, you say media. I think everyone sometimes has this vision that you all work somehow for the same person. So if one of you says something, it's the media's opinion, when it's like, no, that's that particular columnist who honestly hasn't really seen you play in months. He's just looking at your stats, or you know what I mean? So I think that's one of the challenges, and one of the probably bigger frustrations that, and not even just during the pandemic, but in general, happens during this process.
Yeah, we've been among best friends for about 13 years now, and half the time we don't know what the hell the other one's doing work-wise, let alone a big picture, everyone on the same page, media conspiracy. But you've got,
and that's part. Oh, I was gonna say that's part of, if you're doing your job well, I'm getting something exclusive that you don't know that I'm working on, because I don't want you to do the same thing. So I want to, have something unique. I want to find a story, and I want to be the first person to find that story and present that story to the world, or tell that story in a way that hasn't been told by someone else. So, that's one of the things that, there is a lot of competition in this industry. And I think part of the thing, especially going back and doing a lot more news, you're realizing that, all right, we're all at the same press conference, but we're all, everybody's got a different question. Nobody's asked, because if that was the case, the guy would come up there, he'd say something, he'd ask your questions, somebody would ask one question, and the press conference would be over. No, everyone's trying to find a way to serve the public and provide information and tell stories in a different way. And, there's people in the media that are there to give their opinion, but it's not the media. There's not this mass conspiracy, or this thing to kind of disrespect your team, or your city council. We're just trying to relay information and tell stories. And I think that's one of the things that, and I've worked in news before, so I kind of remember this, but it's been a while since I've had to do straight up news. So it's just a bit of a reminder that, oh man, this can get frustrating sometimes.
Yeah, no doubt. I think we need to make sure we keep track of your agenda, your to-do items coming out of this call. You need to climb the social ladder to have casual Zoom calls with John Bel Edwards. And now we need to make sure that
not stopping with John Bel Edwards. We're going all the way to the Senate. Parliament. I like Parliament. It's something real classy about the House of Lords. We need to get there.
And then we're going to go to the House of Lords.
And then having tea at the House of Lords, all that.
You want to learn what mechanical engineers and doctors do as it pertains to the greater scope of their industries, and not just what they do to you. So I think those are 1, 2, and 3. But we have hit on the humble brag of the blue check. So I did want to take a moment to congratulate you on that. Stop the game, give you a game ball. You mentioned having the blue check, and that shows that you're
I've had the blue check for years. You were there when I got the blue check. Come on now.
I know. I forgot to send the email of my information to get on that list. But so your story, I guess you mentioned you've done news before. You grew up around Opelousas and Lafayette area. Then you guys moved to Houston. You came back to Louisiana to go to LSU, where we ended up linking up and working for the Daily Reveille. While I was in Monroe, you went to Beaumont, and then we both started at NOLA.com, Times-Picayune around the same time, where you spent the last several years before joining WWL last summer. I'm just kind of take me through the journey a little bit in kind of the bigger picture sense. If you look at where you are now, how does that compare to what you were hoping for? What were kind of your goals as you started out in this field, and what are some of the things that have been kind of important to you along the way that you try and keep in mind as you take each next step?
Well, honestly, when I started, the goal was to get employed and stay employed. Honestly, when we were coming out, when you got a job, it was, hallelujah, like, and fingers crossed we're keeping it. You know what I mean? So that was honestly the goal. But I think the thing then became, once you got a job, I was all right. What do I need to do to find ways to improve? What do I need to do to find ways to make sure that I become somebody that's essential to this operation succeeding, essential to this operation making money, essential to this operation in a way, or bring something to the table that nobody else is going to be able to do. And when I was in Beaumont, I tried to find different ways of doing that. I tried to cover anything they would let me. On Fridays I would go cover high school football for the sports staff. I did entertainment writing the rest of the week, and I tried to really kind of get involved in the local entertainment scene, learn, meet the local bands and write up features on them. So when they did bigger festivals, we had some sort of exclusive, or, learn the big promoters in the area that were bringing the bigger acts to Beaumont, so that I, could have access to that. And, find ways, or even I covered traffic, transportation. So the goal there was to find out, anything that was going to affect somebody's commute, or, they're getting their kids to and from school, anything, any big transportation or traffic thing. The goal was to find out about it and, get it out there. So, it was just trying to find different ways to make yourself more valuable. But also at the same time, when you're writing a story for the entertainment section, there's a different thing that audience is looking for. So you need to be able to tell the story that keeps them interested, and, makes it something they want to read. Whereas, when you look at sports, a lot of times, sometimes the people just want to get that information quickly. So, you had to learn to be more versatile with your style of writing, and, take some of those elements that maybe I learned from, writing sports almost exclusively throughout college, and adding that to what I was learning about writing and features. And then when I get back to doing sports exclusively, when I joined NOLA.com, taking some of those lessons I learned from writing features and covering traffic and transportation, so some of the style of writing, being creative, not being afraid to take chances, or, add in details that maybe don't seem like essential, but finding ways to work them in that make this story more, I guess, realistic, and something that's easier to visualize. So that's one of the things that, kind of became the goal then, is, all right, find ways to make yourself valuable and essential. And, part of that became too making sure I knew how to edit videos and learning how to work the video editing program. Because, right now in the industry, that's a very big thing, particularly with a lot of people still having to stay home. I know that our video views here at WWL were really high during the quarantine, even older videos. So that's one of the things, you kind of just really needed to trying to find ways to make myself valuable and essential to an operation. Because at the end of the day, despite my goal would obviously be to cover a pro team, but at the same time, I won't be able to take steps towards that goal if I'm not working anywhere. So that's the thing, is to just be able to keep myself in a position to take those steps. And I think that's kind of the thing, just being versatile, being adaptable, being flexible. And that's, kind of the thing I learned.
For anyone that needs proof of just kind of some steps along the way for us, I think two things that popped up in my mind very quickly were, you were only 7 minutes behind schedule for the Zoom call, and I haven't gotten the coronavirus from Tigerland yet. But when we talk about the video stuff, if anyone can go back and find any of those old Spotlight on the Famous with Amos videos that we did at LSU and compare those to some of the things you've been able to do now, I think that would be a really fun find for folks willing to dig a little bit into the internet.
Yeah, definitely growth will be seen if we had a chart.
What have been some stories that kind of stand out to you when you get asked about either the stories that you feel the best about how they turned out, or the stories that were most fun for you as a process to put together, whether that be written, video, or otherwise. I'm sure a ton of it will be transportation from Beaumont, but would have been some that kind of have stuck with you through the years, or more recent. I mean, whenever they may have come, what are some that you really kind of enjoyed?
There's been a few. I think one of the first ones that I think I really felt comfortable or confident that I had really done my job and really kind of finally was when I was interning in Delaware. I did a news internship, and I up to that point had almost done sports exclusively, but everyone told me you should do news. It's going to help you with your sports writing. It's going to help you get more concise. It's going to help you edit yourself better. And because that was one of the things I think I had a problem with first, was just I tried to put every single detail from everything I covered in there, and I wasn't getting to the point. So it was a struggle the first few weeks, and then they sent me on an assignment to cover a Catholic school that had been open for like 100 years or so that was closing. And they were having like a kind of going away party or farewell party for the school. And, I spent like hours out there interviewing anybody that would talk to me. And, I was able to craft a story that kind of like showed that, I talked to people who their great grandparents went to this school. So, and it wasn't just, like a building that was no longer going to be available. This is like a legacy to a lot of people in that area. So I was able to kind of craft a story that really illustrated that. And, my editor, like, as he was reading it, stopped and was like, "This is great." And I was like, okay, getting it. And that was a big confidence boost. And a lot of the stuff I wrote after that, I was able to kind of take a lot of that. All right, this is what you need to be doing. You need to be taking advantage of the fact that you can write, you can translate these people's stories, and stop trying to be so formulaic with it. So that's one story I really enjoyed. When I was in Beaumont, I actually went to another Catholic school that they were going to close, but they got a big donation from an anonymous donor, an alumni of the school. And so I was writing about that and how everybody was so relieved. But while I was there, noticed the guy that was kind of the handyman around the school, and everybody kept calling him Sarge, and I was like, and all the kids kept talking to him and calling him Sarge, and he was just walking around, kind of minding his own business. And the principal was like, "Oh man, the kids love him. He's a veteran of Korea, Vietnam. He got medals in all of them." And so I went and talked to this dude. This guy had lived an amazing life, and was just volunteering at the school, helping around the school just because he wanted something to do. Ended up writing a very nice feature on him for Veterans Day. And I just remember thinking, all right, yeah, you did a really good job here. Your editors really thought, you did a good job. But like, I got a letter from his daughters telling me, how much they appreciated, their father's story being told, and all of this. And so I felt really, good about that one. And, since I've been here, I was been able to, kind of tell some stories of some athletes and, what they've been able to overcome. One of the more recent ones that I felt really good about was I was able to do a story on a guy that you covered in high school, former Warren East and Oklahoma State standout Tyron Johnson. Just kind of got to tell his story of what he learned. Obviously he went to LSU first, and ended up transferring to Oklahoma State and was able to go on and have a pretty good career there. And I kind of was able to tell the story about how what he learned along that journey and how it's helping him. Now he's in the NFL, trying to find ways to make it on the 53-man roster and continue his career in football, which is a game he loves. So those are some of the ones that really stick out to me.
Before you threw the Tyron story in there, I was going to ask how you ended up on the nationwide Catholic school beat, if you had included your IHM background on your resume, or how this.
It just was one of those things, man. Sometimes things get assigned to you, and one of the things I've always tried to do is find try to find my own stories. I'm fine with doing assignments, but there's I think a different sense of pride when you're able to go out and you found this, you've been able to bring this story to the attention of the public. But when you get assigned something, that's a unique challenge too, because sometimes you get an assignment and the editor has an idea of how they want it, but you get out there, maybe that idea doesn't work, or maybe the story is more interesting than maybe they thought it was going to be, and trying to find ways to really be creative with it. And that's sort of and some of these things, it's while when I'm out there, I'm trying to talk to as many people as possible when I go cover things, because you never know. That's one of my favorite things, is to be out somewhere, find a story, and then be able to get another story while I'm out covering this one. And you go. I was able one time to go and watch Jamar Chase, who's current Biletnikoff winner, work out in high school. And while I was there, a guy that was playing in Tulane was working out. So we were able to kind of hook him up with a different reporter and do something on, his journey and what he was, working to do. So, I just, that's one thing, is being able to find stories is always something that I really took pride in.
Yeah. And those examples you gave, I think are really cool. I expected you to get into some music aspect in Beaumont, or like having had a chance to do anything with
the rapping story.
The Crystal Skull vodka story, or like anything along those lines. Yeah, actually, I forgot about the rapping the news.
That was that's one of those things, and because that happened after I had written the Catholic school story that I was very proud of, and then had gotten a couple other features they had assigned me that I think they thought I did a really good job on. So I think that was one of the reasons. While I think the bars were okay, they were solid bars. Let's just be honest. Like I don't turn in weak bars.
I spit hot fire.
Exactly. Who are your 5 greatest rappers? Yeah. Anyway, but I think that was one of the more rewarding things about that was my creativity was kind of valued in that situation. Was trusted, and that was a big confidence booster moving forward with as I worked on making this a career.
To a point that when we went through our orientation at NOLA.com Times-Picayune, and we're sitting next to the head of the company and everyone's supposed to give like a fun fact. I think I said that I don't eat red meat and tried to keep it kind of innocent or whatever. And then you immediately say that we have recorded and performed rap, to which the head of the company turns and immediately wants us to start rapping to our onboarding orientation group. And I guess that was, you had such confidence from having had a chance to do it before, that you were hoping that sort of springboarded you into a common feature, that you were going to get a chance to rap news in New Orleans.
So you're rewriting history right now, because everyone else was telling a usable fact about themselves, something that would endear them to their coworkers, maybe potentially. Everyone else was saying something like, oh, I've worked, I've covered this for years, or I do this, and you come up here, hi, I'm Jarrett, and I don't eat red meat. And I'm like, oh, but you are not going to be the funniest person in the room today, sir. No. So that's why I had to promptly let people know we were in a rap group together, and we're pretty good.
I'm okay. I will give you credit that I think people's expectations of what we can each do are lower than what they are. And I think their expectations for me are lower than what they are for you. And I think that you probably exceed your, no pun intended, bar a little bit higher. And
the pun was intended. Don't joke about it. The pun was intended. Just be proud of it, Jarrett. Be proud of it.
I'm not a punny guy, man.
But you just did another one.
This transition's pretty surprisingly smoothly, I think, into, we'd been I mean, I've been waiting to figure out which other reporters I was going to have join me on some YouTube videos at different points. And in addition to just kind of looking at your paths and career experiences, what could be a little tangent we could get off on. And when you texted me Thursday, having looked at some of the Hurricane Chris arrest news and started asking me who my Louisiana rapper Mount Rushmore was, I immediately froze the conversation and said, let's just wait, record this. This will be our kind of additional piece. And so I guess take me through, you were looking at that news. I'm assuming your thought process wasn't, okay, Hurricane Chris is definitely one of my top 4. Who else is in there? But what was kind of your thought process getting the conversation started, and how much have you been looking forward to kind of fleshing this out?
So when that Hurricane Chris news dropped, my first thought was, man, that was a smash, baby. It was huge. And then he also had the song about Halle Berry, where everybody was doing the mirror thing. It's just, man, that dude came out with some huge hits. And then, I went and listened to him. I'm like, man, these are this old. You know what I mean? Some of those, both of them seem to be before 2010. We were still in college when A-Bay was blowing up.
So weird tangent before we veer too far from A-Bay, which also brings in another kind of dubious individual. Is I remember being at a restaurant in Baton Rouge during college, watching LSU beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa. I think it was the game that Chad Jones had the big sack.
Fourth down stop.
Yeah, and at one, there's not a lot of people in this restaurant. I think most people were probably in Tuscaloosa for this huge game. And there's a guy, well, I guess there's a couple guys sitting over at a table away from us. And one of the guys, I'm thinking, man, that guy looks kind of like Cuba Gooding Jr. And then I start to realize that the entirety of the wait staff is just congregating around that table as much as they possibly can, and eventually realize it is Cuba Gooding Jr. And so it was when he was in Baton Rouge filming a movie, and I'm just confused as to what's going on, because he's kind of like all over the restaurant. Next thing I know, I haven't seen him for a while. He seems like he'd gone to the restroom, but it'd been a minute. And our friend David Craddock has to go to the restroom and is thinking, man, should I wait? Like, is it going to be weird if I like run up on this famous actor in the restroom? And we're thinking, man, he's been a while. Like, you got to go, just do your thing. And he said he went in there, did not see Cuba Gooding Jr. anywhere, was very confused about the disappearing act. And then abruptly the stall door kicks open with Cuba going, hey, baby, hey, baby, hey, baby, all the way back out past our table to his table to watch the rest of LSU Bama that year. And so, yes, long story short, we were definitely in college when that song came out.
Yeah. First off, most Craddock story ever. One of the most. Let me not say most. One of the most.
One of the most that we can share on the YouTube channel.
Absolutely. But I was like, man, this is an a hit, and it's been a while since this was really playing, which got me listening to kind of some of the other Louisiana rapper, I guess you could say one hit wonder, even though we've established that Hurricane Chris had at least two hits. But I was thinking "This Is the Way I Live," "This Is the Way I Live." I was thinking about that.
That Saints remix to that song is still in my head. Once a week, probably.
Yeah, still, absolutely. And then you listen, and also then you remember that stretch where I start thinking about all the other Louisiana guys who reached national prominence, where they were part of the. They were on those 106th and Parks, the countdown every day, and they were on the MTV, TRL. They were finally making, like, Wipe Me Down was just one of the biggest songs in the country at one point. And, start thinking about all these hits, and I'm like, man, Louisiana has really put out, Atlanta, I think, gets a lot of the credit for, being sort of an epicenter of rap, or Los Angeles or New York. But when you think about it, Louisiana has really put out some of the bigger names, in the game. You know, you look at Lil Wayne and just all the smashes, and you know, even his last album, which didn't have some of the, I guess, the commercial success. You know, didn't have those huge hits. Obviously, Uproar, but didn't have like that same, I guess, those same smashes that we've become accustomed to him. But when it dropped, you know, it was on the national conversation. And it had been a while since he had put out a project. So, you know, I just got to thinking about, man, you know, Louisiana's really put out some big artists over the years. And if
I'm
I had to,
shocked. I'm shocked you didn't throw Houston in there when you started saying the big epicenters. As a guy that went through high school age in Houston, that you didn't show some H-Town love on there.
so the thing with Houston is because the area is so big, there's so many people there, and Texas is so big. A lot of those guys really make, you know, can have their entire career in Texas, do great, and when they do have a national hit or a hit that kind of blows up beyond Houston, you know, it's just sort of lagniappe. It's not like I remember there was a stretch where you know, Paul Wall and Chameleonaire were really big in on the national scene. But you know, Paul Wall has just steadily been making music, you know, since, and because Houston's so big, you know, they're making. I believe I remember an interview with Slim Thug. He did that one album that was almost exclusively produced by Pharrell, which absolute banger, slaps on top of slaps. You know, I still can throw that on. It sounds amazing today. The references, the bars, everything, still not dated. Great album. Go listen to it. Like a Boss is on that album, and we all know that that's, you know, that plays in everything still.
You got to watch out. Next thing you know, that's going to be a song on one of those little TikTok videos of know or don't know. Like, the kids telling us how old we are by saying they don't even know that song.
I try to thumbs down all those because it's just so frustrating. So I think TikTok is finally understanding that the algorithm don't show him these. He doesn't like these. But you know, you listen to Houston rap. I believe Slim Thug said in an interview that he actually, because he was putting all the music out himself and, you know, in charge of his own booking and everything, that he was actually making more money before he, you know, got his national record deal and, you know, got his nationwide distribution. So, you know, I think some of those Houston artists, they don't aspire to be, I mean, I'm sure they all aspire to be, you know, the biggest rapper in the game, but a lot of them get really comfortable, you know, just being there and, you know, having, and a lot of the Houston rappers have the respect of the big name artists and the guys in the national, like Bun B does features for everybody. And, you know, Bun B was on one of the biggest rap hits ever in Big Pimpin'. And, you know, he's still putting out music, but he's not running around, you know, chasing that national hit. You know, he just continues to make good songs and, you know, does good features. You know, you look at, and I feel like some of the same with Louisiana guys, but I feel like per capita, these guys were able to achieve this national success in a way that a lot of Houston rappers, you know, haven't been able to.
Yeah, I think it's been interesting for me through my older or more recent years to occasionally have conversations with friends who grew up in different parts of the country and have to wonder, all right, so was this one of the songs in Louisiana that seemed like it was the biggest thing in the world but didn't get to you? Or is this one of the songs that seemed like the biggest thing in Louisiana that really was nationwide? Because there have definitely been some songs through the years that, to me at that age, I thought was the hottest thing out for anyone our age anywhere, and realized it didn't get out quite the same way. And then there have been others that I didn't necessarily realize got out and are just part of the national hip hop lexicon.
And you see, that's one of the reasons you bring, as an interesting point you bring up. When I talk to people like that about Houston songs, you know, there's songs I can put on, and me and my buddies from Houston and my brother will, you know every word because we heard that song so much on the radio. And, you know, we, you know, look, this is like a classic. And everybody else in the car is like, who's this? And then, you know, you got to explain to
this
them.
new?
Yeah, you got to explain to him, all right, well, this is what you call it. He was in this group, but then he, you know, put this record, you know what I mean? Like, and it's all these things that, and I feel like with Louisiana records, I have less explaining. And that's one of the reasons why I kind of think that, you know, Houston rap, and I think just because the city's so big and there's such an opportunity for, if, you know, you become a rapper that is well known in Houston, or a musician it's well known in Houston, you're making a really solid living. Like, I mean, you look at Mike Jones.
Who?
You know, Mike Jones.
Who?
Which Mike Jones. But you look at him. You know, he had that stretch where a lot of those songs were just on the national scene and were blowing up worldwide. And you know, but before that, you know, he was those mixtapes and everything in Houston. Everybody loved those. I mean, Lil Flip was a guy that, you know, we heard his music all the time on the radio in Houston, and he drops that album that kind of brings him to the national spotlight. Exactly, and that's one of the things. Or what was the song he did with David Banner? You know what I mean? There's a lot of guys like that where it's like, all right, yeah, they're finding this success, but you know, these dudes are doing pretty well just in the Houston market, and I think it's just one of those things where the geography just kind of allows them to be self-sustaining. Like, how many California rappers do we not know about? And then when they have a song that blows, you know, there's, you know, years and years of a back catalog we can go get into. You know, I think about was it Kendrick Lamar, for instance, when he finally blew up, you know, everybody, and he puts that album out that you know is huge. You and my brother, for instance, you know, that went back and listened to that mixtape and are like, well, that mixtape's better than the album. You know what I mean? You look at you know, a lot of guys like that, and I think it's some of these bigger cities, it allows for them. Whereas in Louisiana, you know, some of these guys kind of depend on blowing up past Louisiana to make this a career.
It was funny when you mentioned Kendrick. This was after swimming pools had hit, so he was pretty nationally known. Swimming pools had garnered a lot of play coast to coast, and he, Ab-Soul, Schoolboy Q, and J-Rock came through Baton Rouge for a show that a few of us, me, Quincy, and Hawks had a chance to go see, and there were not nearly as many people there as I anticipated yet. It still seemed like fewer people had caught on than I was really anticipating, because when you have the entire Black Hippie group out there and all the hits that those guys had all had at that point, because even as much love as Kendrick was starting to get, every one of those guys had some pretty notable hits, but somehow had not quite hit their stride here the same way I thought they maybe had by that point. And then you just continue to see more and more people have a handle on who they were through the years. But getting into the Louisiana Mount Rushmore, I guess let's go maybe back and forth one at a time. Start from the most obvious so that we get to kind of the fringe of 4 versus 5 type guys, and who we're including versus missing the cut last. And I don't know if you want to go first and give me kind of your first rapper, and we'll kind of open that conversation that way. We'll go back and forth.
So I'm going with Lil Wayne. Lil Wayne is a surefire. You got to put him on there. Wayne, you know, still when he does a feature, you know, it still goes crazy. His mixtapes or you know, sort of like I tell you about the Houston guys, his mixtapes are known by, you know, people can say word for word songs that like were on his mixtapes, and, you know, freestyles that he's done and whatnot. And I think he reached a level of national prominence that was so high that, you know, I mean, look at all the careers he was able to launch by putting guys on his own records. I mean, you look at Nicki Minaj, she came up through the Young Money thing. Drake came up through Young Money. Tyga was with Lil Wayne for a while. So I think you got to put him up there just because that guy found a level of success that I don't think any New Orleans artist was able to reach before. I mean, you know, the guy was doing pop songs. He's on The Masked Singer now, and you know, everybody knows him. You know what I mean? So you know, he does voice work from time to time. Like, this dude is you know, like, he was a pop star at a point where a lot of and it wasn't like he changed too much of what he was doing. You know, like his biggest hits sound like some of his earlier work. You know what I mean? It's not like he changed what he was doing. So I think that's one of the reasons, you know, is he was able to kind of create, you know, a brand of himself that was able to be elevated and bring him to that national prominence. So I think Lil Wayne is definitely one face on that Mount Rushmore, and he is there. I don't think you can argue it.
Yeah, he was probably for sure in your top 4, and then the Masked Singer thing really locked him into the first place on your ballot.
I mean, that's basically, that's the new Dancing with the Stars at that point, right? Like, if you're a star at that point. Like, if they call you to do the Masked Singer, it's because you are somebody that is going to be recognizable to a national audience, and I think that's just a testament to how big he is.
Yeah, I definitely had him as my number 1 first surefire as soon as this conversation started. Wayne was the person that I started my list with in my head before even getting anywhere else. And it has been interesting to see. I remember being a kid growing up, and my dad and one of my uncles have always been very involved in music and just in different bands at different points and playing shows. And I mean, my dad's houses when we were younger, there were usually some sort of like band room where he and other people would get together and practice. And I remember being in one of those band rooms when my uncle was visiting and him telling me at however young I was, hey, like, I know you like this rap music. I was over at the studio the other day and had a chance to meet a guy, Lil Wayne. And of course, young Jarrett freaks out. Like, what you mean, man? You met Lil Wayne? He's like, yeah, he was like a nice guy. Shook his hand. I was like, your hand touched Wayne's hand? What you mean, man? Like, you don't understand how big this dude is. And then that was at that point, as you're seeing him start to like really gain some popularity in New Orleans. But the level that he reached was such a huge national scale where you have a Mount Rushmore of rap conversation, and Wayne is in that conversation regardless of where you're talking about growing up because of everything he did. And I know one of the first questions I asked you in terms of how to sort through this was whether to consider some of the other aspects of production and business side. And I think the way Wayne approached things with his mixtapes and the impact that he had on the industry as a whole that we saw him be at such a pivotal point in, I think on top of just his rapping ability, you add all of the other pieces of what he's gotten into, as you mentioned, and surefire number 1 to me when you have this conversation.
And he still drops us with just like gems. Like, it was that meme that came out and he thought that producer tag was Future shouting him out, Wheezy out of here. So, he's doing podcasts now, and those are must listen. So yeah, I mean, this dude is an icon, not just in New Orleans rap, like you said, like, but in rap music in general. He can still drop albums now, and the fervor is there, the excitement's there. He can get whoever he wants to work with him because everybody wants to work with him. So, absolutely. Wayne, one face.
Y'all know his name? Who's your number 2?
So this is, I think, where you kind of, there's like another tier. But one guy that I think really, and because he's part of that success Wayne had. I mean, you look at some of the hits that really catapulted Wayne to that national prominence, is Mannie Fresh. And I mean, just think about Mannie Fresh, all those old Cash Money albums, Bling Bling, that was a national worldwide hit. Changed like the vocabulary of the world. People started calling jewelry bling bling. Mannie produced that. Everybody Get Your Roll On was a huge hit. Mannie rapped on it and produced it. All Lil Wayne's Go DJ. What's the other? A lot of the huge Wayne hits from that first Carter. Mannie Fresh, Juvenile, Back That Thing Up.
There you go.
Biggest hit, one of the biggest rap hits ever. Mannie Fresh. So I think that's just one of the things. Like, you got to really include him because he was so responsible for so many huge hits, not only as a producer but also as a rapper with the big timers. So he's I think he's a guy that belongs on that Mount Rushmore of Louisiana rap. Yeah.
So after Wayne, I have, I think, 4 people that are in that mix for the numbers 2 through 5 spots for me that are kind of all over. And that's why the immediate question I had for you was, how much of the business aspect comes in and how much of the production aspect, because I don't think Mannie makes a Rushmore of just Louisiana rappers, pure what you're rapping. I thought he had some good songs. The Club Went Crazy, Girl, You Doing It is a Mardi Gras staple for me and the Craddock's and John Correa's and company from back in the day when that came out. But his production, I think, puts him over the top and into the top 4 with everything he did with all those guys, Hot Boys and so on. I mean, just everything.
I mean, just think about the songs that he's rapped on. I mean, obviously, Everybody Get Your Roll On. But also, you got Gator Boots with the pimped out Gucci suits. I mean, just so many hits that, he was a rapper on. He had a verse on Bling Bling. He had a verse on Back the Thing Up. He's all over the place. All those Hot Boys albums, which didn't break that same national level, but anybody in New Orleans will rap a Hot Boys album from start to finish. So,
they were for our like generation, and probably some people a little bit older, some people a little bit younger. That was such a foundational stretch of that music genre in this area. I mean, in the city certainly, but I mean Southeast Louisiana and beyond. And he was so pivotal in putting all of that together and laying that work.
Absolutely. So that's why Mannie, I think, deserves a face on that Mount Rushmore.
Who's your next up?
Okay, so this one, I think when we start to really get a little controversial, but this is why I told you it's not just about the bars. It's not just about the talent. But I got to go with Master P.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about Master P. The man is almost infamous. He's responsible for one of the worst sports contracts in history with Ricky Williams. Like, people, like, it's a legend now that like people are doing documentaries about. He tried out for an NBA basketball team.
Was not that bad.
No, that like probably if he would have like really devoted himself to basketball, would have been an NBA player. He had hits. He brought so many people to the national prominence, with that record label, No Limit Records. I mean, you look at Sook the Shocker, had some huge hits. You look at C Murder. Down From My Hit is still will set anything off.
Oh yeah,
and will turn any party up. They play it in stadiums still. College bands play it. High school bands play it.
It is the hypest moment of any sporting event is when either the song through the PA or a band starts playing that song, which I appreciate you cleaning up for the YouTube channel.
Hey man, it's kids. But C Murder was a No Limit artist. Mystical was a No Limit artist. Snoop Dogg dropped a couple records for No Limit. Master P's own albums were multiple platinum. Make 'Em Say he did movies. I Got the Hookup, which he made a soundtrack for that also banged.
Holla if you hear me.
Yep. I Miss My Homies was a huge song. I mean, the man's influence, with all the No Limit gear. Remember, everybody wanted the shirts and the hoodies with the tank on it, and his son Romeo was a national. Had some huge hits. I mean, the man's business since he also is responsible for even one of the best episodes of MTV Cribs. With that completely obnoxious house. What did he say? He spent $3 million on a bedroom because he put real gold in the ceiling. Like, I mean, that's legendary status. But I mean, music-wise, the man put out some incredible hits himself, and is responsible because of his company and the way they were able to promote him and the way they were able to spot talent. Brought a lot of other rappers to national prominence. So I think you definitely gotta put Master P on there.
Yeah, I actually almost said him before I said Mannie, but both those guys are I think P rapping standpoint, I probably put a little above, but the solidification of their spots, I think so much rests on those other aspects. Mannie with his production and what everything else he was involved in terms of getting some of those other rappers involved and producing for them. And for P, the business standpoint of starting No Limit and everything that meant for for his and other rappers opportunities to take more control of their situations and really kind of build their own careers in their vision. Those are two that very likely could have been in for me anyway, but we're maybe on that 4 or 5 type cusp, and what they did outside of just their own bars locked them in. And so getting also, side note, whenever I've talked to Andrew Lopez, we get sidetracked into the jersey discussions. I would love a Percy Miller jersey as part of my collection. That's one that I do not have that I think would be a phenomenal addition. But getting to number 4, I mean, this has got to be where NBA YoungBoy comes in, right? From everything I understand, talking to all these youngsters that we have had a chance to know through the years, YoungBoy, I thought YoungBoy invented rap as far as what you hear people talk about YoungBoy. So 4 is YoungBoy, right?
It's not YoungBoy for me. Now,
Sorry, kids.
I will tell you though, the work rate that YoungBoy has reminds me in some ways of the work rate Lil Wayne had when he was making that climb to national prominence. You know, Wayne just steadily kept feeding us with music and giving us new things to listen to, and it seems like, you know, every couple of weeks there's a YoungBoy project. So I think he definitely has the drive to get there. I do think though that like the content of the man's lyrics it's got a lot of the things that you want in a rapper. You know, it's raw, it's, you know, truthful. The man's very honest in his music, and you know, he's able to make some catchy songs. So I think maybe, you know, in a few years, if we redo this list, maybe, you know, he's in the discussion. But I think right now he's just too fresh. And you know, there's still a lot of guys I think around the Louisiana area in rap that have done a little bit more than him, and I think because of that, we need a you know, kind of hold off on the young boy.
I enjoy YoungBoy, but it has been fun. It's mainly just been funny to me to see how aggressive that hype has got because of the world we live in now, and how prisoner of the moment we get with stuff, and so immediately everyone, and a lot of people that are in their teens or early 20s don't remember some of the first 3 guys that we mentioned, and kind of, I mean, they know who they are, but they don't remember or have an awareness of how foundational and pivotal they were, and so they overlook some of those aspects. But I agree. I mean, I think YoungBoy's been doing some really enjoyable work, but probably not a Rushmore person just yet. So who is your 4?
So this is where we run into some really, I guess, some of the really challenging things, because I mean, you look at the criteria we use to put these other guys up. You know, one guy that came to mind, but ultimately decided not, was Mystical, because I mean, you just look down the run of hits that man was able to create, and it's such a unique sound he had as a rapper. His flow, his delivery, his voice, everything was so unique. So he was a guy, but I mean, I don't think he was able to sustain that in a way that some of the other guys, and sustain that success and have that long-lasting influence you see from them. Another guy that came to mind was Lil Boosie. Obviously, you know, Wipe Me Down, and I think obviously that prison term, his jail sentence really derailed what could have been, you know, I mean, he's obviously still a very huge name in music, and you know, it's kind of got this legendary status, you know, some mystique about him. But I think he would have been well on that way to being a Lil Wayne type figure if he wouldn't have been wrapped up in those illegal situations that landed him in prison. But and this is one my wife suggested, and after thinking about it, I kind of had to agree with her. Big Freedia.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty good.
When you think about, you know, how Baton Rouge has the jig music, and you know, you hear a lot of that in the Kevin Gates and the NBA YoungBoy. You hear that Baton Rouge sound. Bounce is the type of music that New Orleans, like when you come to New Orleans, they're going to play some bounce. They're going to play bounce versions of everything. And Big Freedia, I think, more than, you know, because Lil Wayne didn't take bounce to the national level. Lil Wayne took that New Orleans style to the national level. He didn't take bounce. I think Big Freedia took that bounce style worldwide. I mean, she's performing at music festivals in Europe and all over the country, all over the world. And I think that's an artist that I think has probably quietly snuck her way onto that Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, leave it to Trinity to be smarter than both of us. Because when I came down to my 4 and 5, I was really thinking a lot about Boosie and Juvenile, who Back That Ass Up was just such a huge hit. And he obviously has a lot of others, but that was one of those songs that everyone everywhere caught on to. And we still see Juvie putting in work, and we get a chance to go see him occasionally on a Lundy Gras or whatever the case may be, and still enjoy him to this day. He seems to kind of wander over for Zulu Ball for at least 20 or 30 minutes every year. And so those were two that were, for me, four or five, and that was my biggest point that I was trying to think about, was which of those to include if I had Mannie for sure in the top 4. And then Mystical was in there for me somewhere in like the 6-7 type range too. But Trinity makes a pretty strong case for Big Frida, and so I don't know that I can put Boosie or Juvie in over Frida, given that case that you just made. Pretty strong.
I could be talked into Juvie because I think for a stretch there, he, and it wasn't just Back the Thing Up, obviously Slow Motion with Soulja Slim was a huge hit, and I think a lot of people around the country know who Soulja Slim is because of that Juvenile feature. And Juvenile allowed him to really kind of dominate that song. And so I think I think there's a case, to be made for Juvenile, but I think for just the contributions of bringing that exclusive style, that New Orleans bounce style, I don't think anyone's done it in the same way that Big Frida has.
Yeah. So I ended up zeroing in on the two guys with the 2 Set It Off hits that are both phenomenal. But I'll just stick with Juvie because that's what I came into this conversation with. But I think the case that y'all made is much stronger for including Frida in there. And we've had a chance to hit on some of the other folks. Obviously, Boosie, someone that's right on the cusp for us. Mystical. Who were some other rappers, whether that came really close to that, or I thought it'd be a good opportunity to mention some folks like a Currency, or I love Pell as another younger guy who they're not Rushmore people, but they are some more, no pun intended off Currency's name, but current people who are worth mentioning. And then from the women's side of thing, Mia X and her impact years ago, getting involved in what had to that point been an all man's game. Who were some others that kind of stood out to you as you really started to kind of pick your brain about who to consider?
Well, you talk about Currency. Currency is a guy that, we've seen him pop up nationally with some very huge hits. Bottom of the Bottle is one that really comes to mind. But I think Currency is one of those artists that, was content without making this, global hit. He's a guy that just enjoys creating and enjoys making music and enjoys rapping. And you can hear it in his lyrics and, the songs he makes. You can hear that, he's really proud of this. He's almost got complete creative control. He does albums with, everybody and finds a way to, keep his own style whilst blending it with theirs. I mean, I've listened to an album he's done with Freddie Gibbs, and you listen to Freddie Gibbs, obviously he's got a very distinct flow and a very distinct style, and they link up. You look at, Currency, I think is a guy who I think he's going to go down whenever he decides to hang it up. There's going to be a lot of people that remember him and remember the songs he's done and have a lot of joy from them. But he's not going to be a guy that comes up when you think of New Orleans music and New Orleans rappers. He's not going to be a guy that I think people will think of that way. But I think a lot of people that listen to him are forever going to, remember that the songs he did with Wiz Khalifa before either of them really blew up, or going to remember the elevators and the address and, Pilot Talk and Jet Life and all of that. They're going to remember that, but I don't think he's reached that same level as some of the other people we were talking about.
I think he and my guy Pell, who I just like to pub as much as possible, just love that dude and his continuing to kind of break out and catch a little bit more attention outside of New Orleans. I think they slot in somewhere like 10 or after. I think Currency's probably in that 10 to 20 range. Pell, hopefully ends up there too. But those are just two really current people that I thought were interesting to just kind of think about and where they might slot in that bigger picture with so many older legendary people ultimately ahead of them. And shoot, we named probably most of what our top 10s would be, but this was fun.
Yeah, man. It was particularly fun was going back and listening to these hits. There's so many that are responsible, that these New Orleans guys are responsible. I mean, and these hits like stand the test of time. I mean, you look at the resurgence Choppa has had with Choppa Style, because the Saints were, it kind of became a Saints anthem during these last couple seasons. And I mean, he's back in, the spotlight for a song he made 20 years ago almost. You know what I mean?
My 4.5-year-old niece for the past going on 2 years now just shouts randomly in the house, "Alexa, play Choppa Style."
I mean, yeah, these dudes made, there was a lot of talent that came out of this area. And, and a lot of it's the southern part of Louisiana. I mean, you look at some of the other like kind of national hits that popped up, guys that like had regional hits even, you look at the Bunny Hop or what was the other one? Josephine Johnny. That was a pretty hit for a while. You know what I mean? A lot of the southern part of Louisiana is, really put out a lot of good artists. And that was one of the things that, the Hurricane Chris got me talking about. That was, he's one of the bigger names to come out of that area, that northern Louisiana area. So, and he had some smashes.
Did you want to shout out Cupid at all as we throw some old names around and the Cupid Shuffle coming out of Lafayette?
Cupid is an R&B artist, so that's why we didn't want to. I didn't bring him up too much because I mean, obviously that hit is just never gonna die. The Cupid Shuffle is just it's here now. It's part of being American. Like you're not gonna go anywhere with more than 10 people and not hear the Cupid Shuffle. But
I think my favorite part of my brother's bachelor trip cruise was just teaching a different group of people to do the Cupid Shuffle in the little on-boat club every night and turning that into like a running part of the routine was the nightly Cupid Shuffle.
But the thing is, even when you would do that, they'd heard the song before. It wasn't like they just didn't know the dance or didn't feel comfortable or confident, trying to do it. That's what you waited on. Like everyone has heard that song.
Oh yeah, they needed that boat confidence to pick up the moves.
Yeah. So I mean, but I think if we want to go R&B, I'm gonna have to do a little more research. But I mean, if we're doing a Mount Rushmore of Louisiana R&B, I mean, Cupid is on there, right?
I guess we'll figure out next time.
That's gonna take some work because see, a lot of Louisiana guys, they've gone and. I mean, you look at some of the New Orleans guys that have gone on to have success in R&B. Yeah, this is going to be a challenge because, I mean, I'm instantly thinking of, obviously, Cupid, but August Alsina is a guy that, seemed to be hitting his stride for a stretch. So, yeah, we're going to have to talk about that.
There we go. Next time on the new look Spotlight on the Famous with Amos, otherwise known as Amos Morale's visits to Louisiana vs. All Y'all YouTube channel. Amos, I appreciate you, man. We may be pushing for one of the longest conversations I've had on here so far. So appreciate you.
Oh, absolutely, man. Anytime.
Again, he's Amos Morale III, works for WWL doing really a variety of coverage in that digital content producer role, a lot of sports still, but also a lot of food, music, culture, and just news happenings around New Orleans for Louisiana vs. All Y'all. Jarrett Roser.